Welcome to POV, the Portland Ovations podcast. I'm Aimée, Petrin, Ovations Executive and Artistic Director. Today we are recording in Portland, Maine, ancestral Wabanaki land. We wish to pay respect to the Abenaki, Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and their elders, past, present, and future. I'm so excited today to have a very good friend, somebody that I've known for now, I think it's going on 15 years. And I'll just say a few words of introduction just to get us started. The special guest is the co-founder and executive director of Indigo Arts Alliance, a Maine business Women to Watch, one of Maine Magazine's 50 Mainers creating a brighter future for the state, a marketing and brand executive, a creative and inspirational force, and like I said, a longtime friend of Portland Ovations and even former board member. Today we have with us Marcia Minter. Thanks for joining us, Marcia.
Hey, Aimée, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Always good to share space with you.
You too. So yeah, here we are, Max.
Here we are, we're masked. We are still masked, even though we are in a nice little studio. We are observing our own protocol since we're in close quarters to be masked. So if anybody hears any ruffling or shuffling, we will blame it on the mask.
Or muffling.
Or muffled sounds, exactly.
Yes, so thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting to have the opportunity to talk about our brainchild, Seeking Resonance. Mm-hmm. So Seeking Resonance is really about finding the vibrational quality of connecting with a place, a space, each other, ourselves. And it's informed by work we did several years ago.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, that's the thing. We've been doing this. I was looking at it, I think since 2008, we have been working together in some way or fashion. Mm-hmm. And when you first joined the board of Ovations, and I love telling the story to people where we were in conversation about another organization collaborating. And I remember leaving the meeting and saying to our board chair, I don't care what happens with collaboration with that other organization, but can we make sure we work with Marcia from now on, no matter how that works out?
I remember not long after joining the board in 2008, we did the salons before we started Seeking Resonance. We did. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And but one funny memory I have is that we had this incredible group. I can't remember which country they were from, but they did this beautiful traditional drumming and they sat on the floor.
At your house?
In my living room.
Yes.
And
the
they
Brazilian
were drumming
group.
And playing. No, they weren't Brazilian. I want to say they were from Afghanistan or something. And the skin of the drum broke. Mm-hmm. And that was like just...
Was that Voices of Afghanistan?
Yes.
At your house?
Uh-huh. We did several events at my house. We did a Brazilian thing.
Yeah.
We did
the Voices of
Afghanistan.
An African
thing.
Okay.
And then we did the Voices of Afghanistan.
Yeah, that was Voices of
And they were drumming and it was beautiful. And then, bam, the skin of the drum cracked. Split open. Mm-hmm. And that was like... Wow, there was like extra spiritual energy mm-hmm. and it was like so from there, then, years of being on the board in 2016 mm-hmm. rolls around. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting a call from you at my office saying, hey, I just want to run an idea by you. And we talked about Seeking Resonance. We mm-hmm. kind of brainstormed, mm-hmm. You had some thoughts. We shared my thoughts. We talked about having, different other people, Daniel Minter being involved mm-hmm. as well, and some other colleagues and things that we knew. And that's kind of the origin story.
It is, and I think I love what you say about calling you in the office, because I think it's like, that's what's been so invaluable about working with you over the time is you always help deepen the experience and the thoughtfulness around things. And I think that was one of those moments where it's like I had this little idea, but like you helped make it a much fuller idea and thinking about who are the other ways and how to make it really dynamic. And I loved, even in that early days, we really brainstormed and played like what are the words that come to mind, and Daniel Minter created the artwork for it at that time, which was a swirling energy because we're still using exactly. I actually the other day I was in another board member's office and I came around the corner and there was Daniel's print from that original series, and I stopped and I had that moment. I said, "Oh my gosh, it's here too." And it was a law office, and I thought seeking resonance is in a law office, and that's good.
Yes.
To have that energy.
Yeah. So here we are now, having transitioned through so many different variations, but always keeping the original idea, I think, intact, which is really about celebrating home.
And connecting.
And connecting.
And connecting to what does it mean to connect to a space or a place? I have another image in my head, also a work by Daniel, and it's from the Malaga series. And it's the image, and it's a print I have and I own, and I can't wait to hang up in my new office. And it's called Home. And it's the woman and she's holding her hands over her torso. And when you look closely, you can see that there's actually a home there. And I think about that too, and that how we need to connect to something that we feel good about. And and I think that's the other thing we've talked about with the series is how to reflect that outwards as well, so that it's where you feel good, you feel valued, you feel welcome, you feel loved. And I think that's where now the reiteration of the series has taken us for 2020 and beyond, because the artists that we've chosen to be part of that are really about artists who are really talking about coming from different places in the world and finding home again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason why that particular gesture is there in those pieces is because it's really intended to help us realize and think about the fact that home is something that can't be taken away from you. You might have to leave your home or flee your home or try to make a home, or home might be a very special place. And so for all of those reasons, home is just something that can never be taken away. It's not just a physical place. It's not geography. It's more of a state of mind. And so
let's talk about our first event of the season.
Yes, yeah. So, our first event of the season is really one that epitomizes all of those concepts, cartography. Cartography is it's just a beautiful way to tell the stories of migration and immigration, and all of the ways in which people have held on to their experiences of home and the notions of home, or the dream of a new home.
And what I also love about this piece, and we are going to be experiencing it on November 4th at Merrill Auditorium, is that it's told through the eyes of young people, which I think is also a really powerful storytelling. And they're young people, meaning older teens, but it really lends itself to thinking about the future and the promise because of these young people and their search for home, and what it means for them to think about looking forward, looking back, looking at their family, and just the way they think about it has a slightly different, it's not pedantic, it's not lecture-y, preachy, it's really from the heart.
And it's immersive, because you really get into these individual stories that are all kind of woven together, but yet kind of in the background, there's this beautiful montage of visual imagery that connects all of those stories in really meaningful ways.
Right. The theater craft itself is actually stunning. And when people see it, what I love is that they've come up with it's both incredibly simple and complex at the same time, which I think a lot of these stories are as well, where you're seeing things on stage that are being assembled as they're talking, and you realize that they've just created a whole new set basically before your eyes.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really brilliant in how they have taken something as simple as a single person's reflection or story and made it so multidimensional that is just so unique. I've never really seen anything like it, because you feel like you're in a community environment, amongst these people that you can really, really relate to. or at least I feel like I can, and yet at the same time, I feel thoroughly entertained, for lack of a better word, but that's because of the set design.
It's riveting.
And the lighting and the original use of choreography, you know, in terms of how people stand, when people stand, where people stand. It's really unique.
Well, and the last thing I'll just add about this one, just because we're talking about the sort of the craft itself, is also their use of technology. Because I think for me, I had the opportunity pre-pandemic to see the piece in New York, and one of the things that struck me was how they use technology and how that technology creates an interactive experience for the audience, which is phenomenal. And I'm not going to give away the ghost on that one because you have to be there to experience it. But what it also did for me is that this layering that you're talking about, they layer the use of technology as a storytelling tool, as a prop, and as a very real way of showing the contemporary experience of the migrant, so that they're actually talking about what does it mean to carry a cell phone when it's all your life and all your documentation is on the cell phone, and at the same time it's actually used in the piece as an interactive piece. So again, the brilliance of the theater makers, Chris Myers and Kaneza Shaw, I bow down to them, but it's really unbelievable.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up about the cell phone, because not only is it the most important way to hold on to your documents, it's also the most important way to stay connected to family and friends and people, and find out where other people are moving around the country or around the world. Yeah.
And we forget about that. I think that sometimes we have this almost, I want to say romanticized, because that's certainly not the right word, but
we have a love-hate relationship with technology.
That's true. That's true.
Especially cell phones.
And it's a lifeline.
But yet it is a lifeline. Yeah. So then we have Leonardo Sandoval. Yes, I'm so excited about his work. Leonardo Sandoval is a Afro-Brazilian tap dancer who's a dancer but uses tap as his practice, and he also has a partner, musician, who plays live while he is performing. You want to tell us a little bit about Greg?
I do. Well, I want to actually. What I want to also say is that there's a special connection with this piece and Indigo, because Indigo has a strong relationship to Brazil, and I thought this would be a great time to talk a little bit more about what Indigo is and is the connection to Brazil, if you don't mind for a second, because I think that would be great for folks to understand that context.
Yeah, so Daniel Minter, who is my husband, visual artist, was awarded a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship several years ago, and it was a travel grant, and we had the pleasure of living in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil, for a year, and we cultivated just lifetime relationships, and it has continued to be our sacred place on the planet. And so we continue to visit whenever we can, and we have friends that are family. And so we both have been always led lives immersed in creativity and culture. So knowing various visual artists and dancers and capoeiristas and various other people in the arts. And so whenever we can, we like to support particularly Afro-Brazilian culture, because the politics of Brazil is even more complicated than the politics of race and culture here in the United States. And so one of the key aspects of Indigo Arts Alliance is that we center Black and brown people and Black and brown artists across the African diaspora. And so our early years in Brazil helped to kind of shape this worldview and this real kind of depth of understanding of the ways in which cultures can be very, very similar. And so that's why Brazil has a really special place for us. And we try to make sure we're amplifying our Afro-Brazilian brothers and sisters, as well as other people from across the diaspora.
And what I love about that description and information is that you brought everything full circle again, because you talked about Brazil as being a sacred place, which goes back to the original concepts behind seeking resonance. And you also talk about it being, you didn't say a home away from home, but in many ways for you, it is that home away from home. So I just love how Brazil holds that space that is so much about seeking resonance. The other thing I wanted to then pick up on what you were saying about music from the soul. One of the things I love how Leonardo talks about his work as a choreographer is that he sees tap as a compositional form.
Yes.
So he is in dialogue with his collaborator, Greg Richardson, the musician, but he sees himself in that they're both composing. He's just composing with his feet, whereas Greg is composing on another instrument. So I love how they are in dialogue around art forms, they're in dialogue around cultures, they're dialogue around energy. And that, I think, is another thing that's really rich about their program, is just that they're in constant dialogue.
Right. And he is so clear about that. I love in our conversations with Leonardo how he makes sure that it's understood that he and Greg are partners, equal partners, and one of their work is not more important to the pieces that they are presenting than the other. They are really symbiotic.
And the joy and the energy that comes from their performances, that's what I'm so looking forward to in a couple of weeks, is just that feeling. I've not experienced them live, but I have experienced a lot of video of theirs, and even on video, you can just feel the heart. It just emanates from their work, and that is something I think is going to be really incredible and special about people who come to see this. And to your point, we don't get a lot of opportunities for live music and live dance. We're often seeing dance performed to pre-recorded music, and so this is really a unique experience for a lot of us to be able to have.
It is. It's really improvisational, and there is an aspect of call and response about it in terms of the way that they work together, but it's also very much a composition and choreography that's designed to really support the work. And it's all of those things, and that's really exceptional.
A lot. Yeah, that's a lot. And to go back to an earlier word you used, and it's entertaining. I mean, it is, to watch them at work is just. I know for myself that when I experience dance that is really kinetic, I have my own kinetic experience with it, where I will be at the end of my seat, I will be breathing likely with the in step with the dancers and with the musicians, and I imagine that is exactly what's going to happen at Partido, is that same feeling of just wanting to be in one with them, to be in resonance with them, to be in that, to share the vibrational quality that they will be giving off. I mean, very much so. Literally, yes. This will be a resonant experience with them. And then we get into the spring with Sphinx Virtuosi, and they are an incredible group that was founded by Aaron Dworkin, who's a MacArthur genius, and based out of Detroit, and they were founded very specifically and intentionally to put a new face on classical music, which, as we know, for many has been defined as music that comes out of the 17th, 18th century Western European canon, and they are really looking to change that. And so all of the artists that are performing as part of Sphinx, they are all award winners of this particular program, and they are all Black or Latinx musicians.
Yes. And what I love about that is that they're actually disrupting the narrative that this is new, when Black folks and Latinx folks, BIPOC people in general, have been practitioners of classical music for ever. And you can really go back to the 17th century and the 16th century and learn about BIPOC people, particularly Black folks and Latinx folks, who were performing, writing, composing classical music. And so I think this idea that Sphinx is putting a new face on it needs to be corrected, because
well
they're
said.
actually exposing with intention the scope and talent of bringing together a collective of people of color that are focused in this particular genre of music.
And I think what you were saying too, that the intentionality that they're doing this with. So I love that they're calling it out. They're saying it. They are bringing to the fore some of these composers that we may not have seen in other spaces and places. They're also, the other thing that I love about them is that they are also disrupting the concept of what it means to be at a classical concert. And there's this whole idea out there that classical concerts are supposed to be a certain way, and you're only supposed to clap at certain times. You're not supposed to show any kind of appreciation or any kind of response or anything. And that is completely a contrived notion. When you go back to the days to really go back to the days of yore, a lot of this music was being presented in taverns and other spaces, and where people were allowed to be human beings.
Right.
And somehow we've created this idea that you're supposed to sit in your seat and you're not supposed to move and you're not supposed to do anything. And I think that's the other thing, is that they've disrupted that concept.
I love that. I love that.
Well, who wants to
kind
do a
of
performance?
stripping away the pretension. Yeah.
So there's a lot that I think, and they're also commissioners. So they're not just looking at what has been historically in place and not been visible, but they are also making sure that there's new work being composed, and they're adding to the canon. Exactly. And there's going to be a piece on our program by Jessie Montgomery, which is exactly an example of that. And she is one of the leading composers, I think, of our time. She's noted as being a Black woman, so there's all of the she's just a damn good composer, and she's also holding all those other spaces up as well.
Yeah.
And so that's exciting, and it's really interesting. In this year alone, in the Ovations Chamber Series, and this is the programming we've been doing for 90 years, there's actually a program in another with the string quartet, Pacifica Quartet, that also has some of the same composers that are showing up in Sphinx, which I love, because it also says that this isn't music that should only be called out by Sphinx. This is music that should be held up by everybody who's playing music.
And also just the role modeling, that's happening through the visibility and the intentionality that they're doing with the medium is really huge for young people.
And I think that's where, when you get back to the changing the face, they're putting it out there that this is a place for you too.
Exactly.
And that's how they are.
That's
in
the role
schools.
modeling in action.
And then I feel like we culminate with what's going to be probably one of the highest energy, most sought after, waited for, because this is one of the programs, Step Africa, that we didn't introduce last year, but we were also able to do a fair amount of digital and virtual programming with them. One morning we were doing a digital workshop, had a step, and we had people from up and down the East Coast, and I feel like we had some other countries represented at that one as well. Katie, you might remember. Do you remember what other country we had? No? But I know we had people coming in from all over the country to learn how to step. And we had schools throughout Maine also participating in virtual programming with Step Africa. So there's a whole state, in at least greater Portland area, ready for Step Africa.
Yeah. I almost feel like they were actually here.
I know. It's seriously, we feel that way too, because we spent so much time in space with them. I actually took the workshop. It was not pretty, but I took it. But yes, we really engaged with them.
I think that when I think back on that one, I'm like, wait a minute, that was
Didn't we
virtual?
already do that?
We weren't actually in an auditorium. Yeah, and there's something about the accessibility of the art form that makes you feel like, oh, I wasn't actually dancing. Oh, I thought I was doing it.
I actually took that workshop. I was on the road that day. I actually took it from my car on Zoom, and I was watching it, and I was doing it in my car, and I remember thinking,
Oh, I want to see that.
well, I know. Well, I remember thinking as
Glad
I was like
wasn't on
pulled
the
over. I
road.
pulled over on the side road, but I was in a parking lot, and I thought, if anybody looks at me, they're gonna really wonder what's going on, because my arms were going all over the place. But I think they were one of the companies that in this last year really figured out how to make their work translate in a virtual space. Again, it's all about that energy and that heart that can emanate through anything. But just for folks to know the history of STEP also, this is a form of dance that came out of historically Black universities and colleges, often danced by sororities and fraternities. And so they're the company that's really credited with stepping from a more vernacular community-based form, like I said, colleges and universities, and bringing it to the stage as more of a formal concert presentation.
Right. But the other thing that's really beautiful about STEP, and the very intentional reason why I think they name their organization, their group, STEP Africa, is that the STEP actually originated in Africa,
South
the
Africa,
art form.
right?
And so there were various different African tribes. One of the ways in which people dance was in this form that we now call step. And so that's why in African American culture, when you can take it back to things like the types of dancers in the Gullah Geechee region of South Carolina and Georgia, when you see people doing kind of the dances where they are like moving their feet and they're clapping their hands, that's step. That is coming from Africa to the United States, being kind of continually redefined and reshaped in different ways. And so we go from that form of step into other forms of step. You can almost say tap is a form of step.
I was going to say, I mean, they are percussive dance forms.
Yes, And then that is also why, particularly for HBCUs, they use that dance form as a way of building tight-knit communities, the sororities and the fraternities, and enculturating within the initiation and the processes that create the solidarity within those groups, African forms. And so STEP is one of them, but there are so many other things that are embedded in the processes that people go through when they're pledging a sorority or fraternity,
to create that affinity
especially
and loyalty
at HBCUs. And then I think, so there's that. And I remember growing up in Richmond, Virginia, I went to all Black schools. And I remember being in elementary school and getting to go to the campus at Virginia Union University to see, the Q Dogs step. And it was like, oh my God, one day I'm going to be an AKA, or I'm going to be a Delta, and I'm going to be able to cheer on the Alphas and the Omegas. And I never did any of that. But by the time I got that age, I was like, that's not really me. But I still love it. I love it so much, and I get so much energy out of seeing it and so much cultural pride. So I am thrilled for that, and it made me so happy, too, to see Beyonce finally really get behind that. She tore it up.
Well, but it's so funny when I'm having so many thoughts right now about sort of the transmission and of cultures and changing and moving around. And one of the things going back to Step Africa, thinking about what they do too, is that they do pay homage to the history of the form.
Yes.
So they do take. I mean, they do take us back, I think, to South Africa, if I'm correct, at least in their storytelling. So that we do see that this is something that has history and has import across lands and countries, and it's not just something that was done for entertainment or just done in this one setting.
Or
it's
just
really,
done in the 21st century.
Or just done in the 21st century, that it actually has huge roots. And so that's one of the things I think is really special about them as a company as well, is that they managed to bring both up into the fore without having one, you know.
That's home. That brings us back full circle to seeking resonance. That is another way of holding on to home. And really, I think that's embedded in all of these incredibly talented performers that we'll get to see this fall and next spring. Is whether we were talking about cartography or Sphinx or Leonardo Sandoval and Greg and now Step Africa. The singular thread is they all are telling stories or sharing important cultural legacies from home, from various parts of the diaspora. Which brings us to, the fact that we also are in collaboration with the Greater Portland Immigrant Welcome Center.
Right. And they've been a really important piece in terms of also helping us to hold this space, because they are working directly with folks who are in migration and in movement at this very time. And so for them to also help us to think about what does that mean in real life right now on the ground, and with cartography in particular, we're really thinking about the different ways to connect with so many of the new Mainer communities here.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times when you're bringing art like this, there's different ways different communities will experience the art. And for us, I feel like sometimes it's the role of us to say, here's an opportunity for some folks to connect with home, and here's an opportunity for people to understand what home means for somebody else.
Exactly.
And so the more we can provide those opportunities to think from both those directions, this is not just work for people of color. This is not just work for people who are new Mainers, and it's not just work for people who are going to have a voyeuristic opportunity either. It's really about coming together.
Exactly. That's the whole impetus for the entire concept, even going back to 2016, is how can we really be a part of building community? And that's understanding that, there are so many similarities across cultures, and we can have so much respect for differences.
I think at one point we said something about celebrating our similarities and honoring our differences, and that's where we come together.
And I think with cartography, if I remember correctly, there is a young woman who came to Maine and lived in Maine for a while.
And she's living here, yes. She's a young Rwandan woman, and she's actually is living here in Maine. So what I love about that story is also the fact that we live in a really creative community.
And a very diverse community.
So it's about really, here's somebody who's chosen to come and choose Maine and choose Portland as a place to live, to find their new home.
Right.
And she's part of an international creative community, and she's bringing so much to it, and we're excited to work with her.
And she gets to come back home.
Yes, when she's
as a part of this incredible production that she can share with her home community.
So there's something about these, I'm again picturing that swirling image that Daniel created at the beginning, where we are all coming back to this place and space, and it may look different at different times and where we are in that journey, but we're all wanting to come back to a place that we feel good, that we feel welcome, that we feel valued and loved.
Exactly.
Stay tuned and check the Portland Ovations website, portlandovations.org.
And the Indigo Arts Alliance website as well, indigoartsalliance.me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us in studio at POV today, and I can't wait for all that we have this year and hopefully into the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for POV. Seeking Resonance has been made possible in part with support from the New England Foundation for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, and from the generosity of local sponsors such as Coffee by Design, Batco Financial, and First National Wealth Management. We're grateful for their support.